All right, so this is hopefully been a good message, one that's not going to make me popular among my peers, obviously, but it is what it is. But in the meantime, I want to encourage you that even the people that I called out in this teaching, I believe them to be well-meaning. They're not doing anything purposely to harm. They just don't know what they don't know. Okay? And so it is what it is. In the meantime, this is the Afterburn. This is where we talk about, discuss anything that came up during the teaching that you would like to either make a comment on or ask a question about for clarity. And so if you want to raise your hand. If you're on live stream, we've got Robert and Kirk is getting trained. So not Kurt, but Kirk is there getting trained. Okay, Deirdre, go ahead.
So I just had to take a couple of notes on my phone. Sorry, I'm using technology. You made the comment about how when the Israelites were worshiping the calf, they were attributing it to Yahweh. And I thought of another time where we read about that, and it's when they associated Yahweh with El, who was the consort of Asherah. And it kind of was, Yahweh and his Asherah. So I kind of made that connection. And then I thought about how El is basically just means God. And I thought about how most of the people who think that they are, walking the right way, they're using just the plain word, God. So you have no idea what type of Elohim you're talking about when you're using that, just the plain word. Was that correct?
Well, just recognize that on the one hand, that is correct, because if you're just using a generic term, then unless you make it more clear. If you're talking to me and you're referring to God, I know you're talking about Yahweh. If you're talking to the average person, they may not know what you're talking about because they have their own vision and idea of what God is. But realize that the word God itself is no different than using the word El or Elohim, because it applies to all those being worshipped as beings that are like the Creator, those that are thought of as being awesome in power and authority in the earth. Now, so it's sort of a catch-all word and is totally usable and appropriate for all the sacred namers that are having cows and freaking out. But okay, because even Elohim or El is not exclusive, as you know and just said, to Yahweh. Okay, he talks about the false Elohim all the time. Okay, and so it's a catch-all phrase for all those that are worshipped as having that power, majesty, and authority that we know Yahweh has. That's why Yahweh says, I am Yahweh, your Elohim. Okay? Or the true Elohim. And so let's understand this. So there's nothing wrong with using the word God as long as you're applying it to the correct one. All right? But otherwise, good connection.
And then we mentioned the blood moons. And I had a memory about how when I was still walking in Christianity and someone would talk about the return of Messiah, I would get so nervous. Even at the age of 5 years old, people would talk about, we're going to go to heaven and we're going to live forever. And it's a wonderful thing. And I'm sitting here thinking, well, now, wait a minute, that sounds scary.
Well, to a kid, yeah.
Sure. It's like living forever and ever when people, the way I know, you're supposed to die, and we're going to live forever and ever 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 and ever. And I would get like these fits. I would lay in bed and just start to have these panic attacks. And then I came into Torah, and I would, hear about Messiah coming back, and I would be like, okay. I would be calm. And I have no idea whether or not it was just a different spirit.
Well, you have more information now to understand how to relate the concept. Okay, because as a kid, you couldn't connect that concept to anything. You had to just try to grab, just in the ether, so to speak, to figure out what that all meant. Now you have a lot more that you can kind of draw on to kind of picture what that all means. So that's why you have more of a piece. Okay?
Thank you.
You're welcome. All right. But, the thing that we're dealing with here is we're dealing with the idea that there are those out there in leadership that are today, just like, even in Yeshua's day, and after he was resurrected, we are told by the apostles even that the spirit of anti-Messiah, that anti-Messiahs were already there then. Okay, and that's also in the teaching of Beware False Prophets. It says, Deuteronomy 13, beware the dreamer of dreams, who says, such and such, and then it comes true, but they're using it to lead you away from Yahweh. Got a lot of that happening in the Sunday church. A lot of stuff is happening. It really is. But is it leading people to or away from the Torah and Yahweh and the truth? That's the key. Dawn?
I just wanted to go back at the beginning, Jeremiah 23, when you talked about, let's say the verse says, I will give them their own land.
Okay.
I know Rico did a pretty big teaching on honor and shame, and land ownership being something that only the elevated people got, and that was given to people as that was honoring. You were not honored if you didn't have land. So is this kind of a way that the Father's saying that he's going to elevate us as his people so that we would have honor and not shame? Or is it actually saying, because I'm pretty sure there's a verse or someplace, now I'm speculating, I can't remember, that says that the entire earth at some point in the future will be Israel, like we are Israel, and will dwell in all the earth. So the whole earth will be Israel. So is it one or the other or both? Or
Well, it's got elements of both. I mean, look, there are elements of, in that time frame, there were the free and the slaves. There was definitely almost always a caste system, a caste system. And so, only certain people were able to own land. And so it was a big deal to have that. But also in those days, there was the constant fear of molestation, where people would come and take your land or occupy your land. And there was a constant movement of peoples and wars and armies and dominance. Like when Babylon came in, or Assyria came in, or whatever, came in. There was peoples always doing that. The Greeks came in, the Romans came in. Always this, in that area of the world especially, a constant changing over of land dominance. And he's saying, I'm going to give you land and nobody's going to bother you.
so are we the land? Is that the land that he's taking back? Because it says the kingdom will be within you, and he's going to do all these things, right? Our covenants on our heart.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's taking the metaphor beyond where we intended it to be. We will be dwelling in the land, on the land. It'll be our land. But he's talking about the physical space on which we dwell.
So we'll have to leave here eventually.
We're here in the U.S.?
Yeah, U.S. Will there be a great exodus and we'll be sojourning that way?
Well, I think that probably for most of us, it's going to be after we're changed and we meet him in the air on his way to Jerusalem.
I'm okay.
That's the Millennium and Kingdom teaching.
Okay.
Okay, so maybe go back and listen to that again.
Okay.
All right. Part 4 coming soon. No. Okay. I may never do it just to tease you forever. All right, bring it over to Robert.
First question is from Leanne. Does Jeremiah 23:11-12 describe the reasons behind Messiah's actions in the temple in John 2:13-19? Was this a matter of wickedness and corruption?
I mean, there was plenty of stuff going on. I don't know if that it connects here necessarily to Jeremiah 11 and 12, or 23 verse 11 and 12, but, he saw what was going on in the temple. It was the money changers that were taking advantage of the people. And because you have to understand that to go in to do the things of the temple, you needed to only be able to do all your business with the temple half shekel. So it had to be the temple money. And the money changers would take whatever you had, and they would exchange it, but they didn't use equal weights and measures. And they knew they had you, between a rock and a hard place, because you couldn't do what you needed to do without it. So therefore, they charged you whatever they wanted to charge you. And they really turned this place into a greed and graft and all that other stuff that was going on. So, can it connect to here? Here it's telling you what the state was, but it doesn't say I'm just going to wipe them out of the temple at this point, okay? It does say, for I bring evil on them in the year of their punishment, but there was no year of punishment going on here and that kind of thing. It was just, he happened to be in the temple, and he saw what was going on, and he wanted to make a very loud and clear point. So I wouldn't connect them together necessarily.
All right, from Dominique Bussy. So what if you are sharing your message amongst your peers? Are you putting yourself in the position of a teacher?
Just be really careful on the things that you share, that you actually are confident about what you're sharing. I would say it would not be a bad idea most of the time. I do this myself to a certain degree, to point people towards a teaching and not teach. I mean, if people start asking questions, that it's better to point towards a teaching. When I say I point, now obviously I'm pointing people towards my own teachings, but rather than my trying to answer a question and even trip myself up by not remembering all the details right, I point them to a place where I know I thoroughly, presented it with my notes in front of me, and so I'll point them towards a teaching. I even do that here during these teachings. I'll point you at another teaching, okay? Like even when Dawn asked her question, I said, well, maybe the Millennium and Kingdom teaching, to go and refresh that thought. So yes, you're still welcome to. Look, the point of these teachings, if I haven't said this in a long time, is 4 points. Understand it, so you do it, so you can defend it, so you can teach it. Okay? So ultimately, I want you to be able to teach it. I'm just telling you to be really reluctant to go there until you're sure that you've studied it enough that you really do understand it, that you do know how to do it and you're doing it, and you're able to defend it, meaning you know where all the verses are where people are going to point to you why you don't need to do it or whatever it is, or you're doing it wrong. And then you get to that point of teaching. So I'm not telling you that you should never teach. I'm just saying you should be very careful and reluctant to do it unless you are confident that you are not filtering through your own filters, that you have now a clear, unfiltered understanding. Does that make sense? Okay? So no, I think ultimately we should all be able to teach. You just have to get trained first. You got to study and have a teacher to check with you and say, do I understand this correctly? If I were to answer someone's question this way, would that be correct? Go to your teacher. And then if your teacher tells you it's correct and the teacher's wrong, it's on him, not you. Because you did the right thing and went to your teacher. Now, of course, don't just pick any teacher. That's where it's on you. The teacher you pick is on you.
Diana McMillan, she's asking, in Acts 2:17, it says, I will pour my spirit upon your daughter and son, and they will prophesy. Please help me to tie this in with what you say. Is this something that has been added to, or are there other things that connect?
Say that one more time.
It's the passage in Acts 2:17. I will pour my spirit upon your daughter and son, and they will prophesy. She's asking to help rectify the use of the word prophesy there with what you're saying.
Well, yeah, with the Spirit being poured. First of all, the Spirit being poured forth is to, in Acts 2, we are relaunching or launching the full ministry here. You got all the apostles there, and the people are gathered in Jerusalem for Shavuot, okay? And he says here that this idea of prophesying is that the people will do like in Moses' day. They will speak the word of Yahweh with authority. As the Spirit leads them, as they're trained and discipled by the disciples. Remember, the disciples are sent out at the end of Matthew, right before the book of Acts, right? They're sent out to do what? Make disciples, to teach and train in a discipleship relationship, and then those people will be able to speak the word of Yahweh with authority. And so he said, I'm going to pour out my spirit, and then the people will speak, or they will prophesy. Again, you just have to have the right definition of prophecy, okay? Because the Spirit is supposed to do what? Bring to remembrance and stir to remembrance what you've been taught, instructed, and know. Okay, it's not just to give, people think of the Spirit just to provide unique, private revelation. Be careful with that one. That's where trouble is. That's a big, big, danger zone when you're thinking that the Ruach is giving you private revelation. Hopefully that answered that question. What else?
Candace Middleton is asking, is prophesying in Baal when those who teach against Torah and keeping it? Is there more to it than that, just that, or is it just that?
One more time?
When prophesying in Baal, when those who teach against Torah and keeping it?
Right. When you're allowing the influence of any other authority to influence you in a wrong direction, that's what he means by when he says you're prophesying in Baal. So it's not like you actually went to a Baal temple and then you found out what Baal teaches. So like the whole idea, for example, of Christianity teaching the law has been done away with. Well, that's a Baal teaching if there ever's been one. Okay? So that kind of thing. Or the NIV people putting in Mark 7, and thus Jesus made all foods clean. Well, that didn't happen. Okay? So those are Baal. In other words, it's allowing another authority to insert itself under Yahweh's authority, or to claim to be that authority.
All right, from Barbara Githin. How can we tell the difference between punishing us or a trial to strengthen us?
Look, he's talking here to those who should know better in the leadership. He says, I'm going to punish you. Remember, curses may feel like punishments because you're talking about the idea of correction. He says that Yahweh corrects or chastises all his children that he loves. Okay? So punishment in that perspective is a wake-up call. Hopefully when you punish your children, which a lot of us have been punished as children, or we have children, we punish them, our purpose is to get them to recognize the error of their ways and to make a decision not to do that anymore. So the trials and punishment are synonymous from that point of view, with the idea that at that point you would come to know his heart, as we read, and understand perfectly what he has been trying to accomplish, and then you'll align yourself with that. So don't get hung up on the idea of, am I being punished? It's correction in one form or another. Go back to the baptism of fire teaching. It kind of covers it that way. From the idea of like a lot of the things you do, you brought it on yourself. Okay, so in that point of view, it might be punishment. Okay, you brought the chastisement on yourself. Other things are things that you may not even realize you need to correct, and you ended up in a trial, and that trial brought something to your attention that you need to correct, and you correct it.
Okay, I think that's all the ones from the live stream.
All right. Okay, well, and what, Dawn? Okay, so Dawn was asking about when I gave the 4 things, like understanding it, so you do it. Okay, understanding goes through all 4 levels. Understanding that I'm talking about in the teachings, that you understand what to do, when to do it, how to do it, etc. That doesn't mean you understand why it's done. It doesn't mean that you understand the need for it. Okay, you have enough understanding so that you can do it. Okay, does that answer the question? Then in doing it, you may glean deeper understanding of why it was even required to do it. Okay? And that will help you then to defend it so that you can then teach it. Okay? All right, so yes, a lot of things you can't understand Shabbat from the point of view of why do we have it, why did he create it, why is it important till you do it. But you can understand everything you need in order to do it. Okay? You don't go to work. You have a commanded assembly. You boil what you boil, cook what you cook in advance, right? You have instruction. So you can understand that, and then you can do it. But then in doing it, you glean a whole different level of understanding about why it was given in the first place, what was his purpose in making it a commandment, all that level of it. Okay? Did I clear it up? Oh, okay, it was for everybody else. Okay, good. All right. Dawn wasn't worried about it. She thought that maybe you guys were confused. And so, okay. Thank you for that clarification. Okay. So that should wrap it up on the Afterburn. Shabbat.
Say hi to